Wichita Liberty TV, featuring host Bob Weeks. Local politics without the spin. Interviews with nationally respected economists. Hear directly from Kansas conservatives about what matters to you. It's individual liberty, limited government, and free markets. Wichita Liberty TV.
Hello, I'm Bob Weeks for Wichita Liberty TV, your weekly source for news, analysis, and commentary about Wichita and Kansas government and public affairs. We're broadcast on Great Plains Television, channel 26.1, also its companion website, kgpt26.com. Some of you may know me from my blog, that's The Voice for Liberty at wichitaliberty.org. The motto there is individual liberty, limited government, free markets, and economic freedom in Wichita and Kansas. If you'd like to learn more about the issues covered today or to contact me, please visit wichitaliberty.org. You can subscribe to the email newsletter, like The Voice for Liberty on Facebook, and follow me, Bob Weeks, on Twitter. Well, one of the largest failures of the Kansas legislature this year was the failure to advance any school choice legislation. In December, Senate President Susan Wagle, one of our state's top leaders, told the Wichita Pachyderm Club that there would be a charter school bill this year. But no such bill was introduced. And now Kansas Republican legislative leaders are saying that expanding charter schools in a way that is meaningful, well, it might be contrary to the Kansas Constitution. So what are charter schools? Well, first, they are public schools, not private schools. The difference is that charter schools have more leeway in how they operate. Generally, they operate independently from the local school district. In Kansas, charter schools must be authorized by local school districts. This means that anyone who wants to start a charter school must obtain the permission of the local school district. And as a result, there are very few charter schools in Kansas. Local school districts simply do not want the competition. But Kansas, we do need to do something to improve our schools. I'm sure you've heard bragging about the quality of Kansas schools. Some of this is due to a false perception, a deception really, created by the state. And what has been the case is that the test that Kansas used to measure student performance was easy. In other words, Kansas cooked the books. The Kansas education establishment would say students are proficient in a subject when in fact the students were performing at a low level when compared to other states. Kansas used low standards, in other words, and it created a false impression of high student achievement. Now, it's not me that says that. The United States Department of Education has performed studies which compared state tests to a national test, that test being the National Assessment of Educational Progress, or NAEP test. And year after year, it was shown that Kansas applied lax standards to its students. This study, it's called a mapping study, it did not analyze how well Kansas students performed. Instead, it evaluated the yardsticks that states created and used to evaluate their students. And Kansas used standards that were, in some cases, very near the bottom. Even worse, it was found that during the last decade, Kansas actually weakened its standards. Fortunately, this has changed. Now, Kansas school standards are more realistic. A presentation by the Kansas State Department of Education to the Kansas State Board of Education explained the relationship of the new standards to the former. It said the Kansas College and Career Ready standards are more rigorous than the previous Kansas standards. And as a result, Kansas students scored much lower on the new Kansas tests, which is more proof that the previous standards were lax. But there's something else, and it's really important. It is unfortunate that, generally, minority students do not do as well in school as do white students, and this shows up in test scores across the country. I'm showing you some NAEP scores for Kansas and national public school students. I've circled some problem areas. Consider grade 4 reading, which is a really important score. In Kansas, when we look at all students, 35% are proficient at reading in grade 4. For national public schools, it's the same number, 35%. But look at this. Only 15% of black students are proficient, and that is a tragedy. National public schools do a little better at 18%. But look at this. Among white students in Kansas, 42% are proficient at reading at grade 4. For national public schools, 46%. So why can't Kansas teach white and black students to read as well as the national average of public schools? Even more importantly, why is there such a big difference between black and white students? And what can we do to fix this? Now, the response of the Kansas public school establishment is that we must increase spending on schools. Of course, that's the answer they have for every problem. And it is the easiest response. But it's difficult to believe that adding more spending to the existing system will be of much help. At least any amount of additional spending that is within the realm of political possibility. So what can we do? Well, in many states, charter schools have helped the most disadvantaged students. The Credo studies at Stanford University are often cited as the most comprehensive and reliable research on charter schools. In its 2013 update to its National Charter School Study, we find this partial quote from its executive summary. Enrollment and persistence in charter schools is especially helpful for some students, particularly students in poverty and black students. Well, here's another quote. It said the 27 states in our study provide the widest angle view of the charter school sector to date. Across multiple measures, the students in these charter schools have shown both improved quality over the results from 2009 and an upward trend in their performance over the past 5 years. In other words, Stanford University is finding that charter schools are getting better. And then there's this. Looking back to the demographics of the charter school sector in the 27 states, charter school enrollment has expanded among students in poverty, black students, and Hispanic students. These are precisely the students that, on average, find better outcomes in charter schools. These findings lend support to the education and social policies that focus on education as the mechanism to improve life chances for historically underserved students. Charter schools are especially beneficial learning environments for these students. In other words, the study is saying poor and minority students learn better in charter schools. And again, for emphasis of this very important finding, the study says enrollment and persistence in charter schools is especially helpful for some students, particularly students in poverty, black students, and English language learners, all of whom post significantly higher learning gains in both reading and math. Hispanic students are on par with their traditional public school peers in both reading and math. And for students with multiple designations, such as being black and in poverty, the impacts of charter schooling are especially positive and noteworthy. So, yeah, that sounds like something that works. But not everyone is convinced. Opponents of charter schools in Kansas read the same study and focus on results like this. Because the study does say, based on our analysis, we found 25% of schools had significantly stronger growth than their traditional public school market counterpoints in reading, 56% were not significantly different, and 19% of schools had weaker growth. So opponents of charter schools emphasize the 19% of charter schools that were worse than the public schools in the area of study. And they say this means charter schools are a failure. But there's a big difference. No one forces parents to send their children to a bad charter school. These bad charter schools should be closed, and that often happens, as it is much easier to close a bad charter school than a bad traditional public school. And opponents of charter schools also cite the 56% of charter schools that were not significantly different from local schools. And they say this means we don't need charter schools, as the regular public schools are just as good. But if charter schools are just as good, why not have them and allow parents some choice? Especially since charter schools are cheaper than traditional public schools. But it's the charter schools that do better than traditional schools that we need to nurture, especially because the students that do best in these charter schools, the poor and minority students, they don't have access to the same opportunities that middle class or wealthy families have. Especially because it is these students that traditional public schools are leaving behind. Now, the Kansas school establishment vigorously opposes charter schools. This includes the Kansas Association of School Boards. This organization is funded by local school districts, which is to say your tax dollars, and it opposes charter schools. The teachers' unions do not want charter schools. Democrats do not want them. School superintendents don't want them. Well, I should say, these groups usually say they'll welcome charter schools if the charter schools have to follow the same rules as the regular public schools. But then the charter schools would not be any different, and they wouldn't work. Well, our legislature and governor do not support charter schools. Well, okay, many say they do. So where was the bill this year for charter schools? Have you heard Governor Brownback support charter schools? I haven't. Some governors have been warriors for school choice, not Kansas Governor Sam Brownback. Now, school choice opponents have taken up the banner of privatization, saying that charter schools destroy public schools and funnel public tax money into private hands. They worry that greedy charter school operators will earn profits. The horror, they say. And they say capitalism cannot be applied to education. But when they reject charter schools in Kansas and also other forms of school choice, these so-called advocates for children are endorsing a system in which just 15% of black fourth-grade readers are proficient in reading. That is a tragedy. It is a stain on our state. It has been called the civil rights issue of our day. We must do something to correct this. Welcome back to Wichita Liberty TV. I'm Bob Weeks. Well, here's some good news. The Americans for Prosperity Foundation has achieved a victory for free speech and free association. So here's a question. Must donors to nonprofit organizations live in fear of exercising their First Amendment right to support any organization, which effect is to diminish the amount of expressive and associational activity? Should these people be denied their right to their speech? Well, the Constitution says no. Well, nonprofit organizations like the AFP Foundation file a form known as IRS Form 990. The first part of this form is public information and may be obtained from the organization itself or from services like GuideStar. Also part of the filing is Schedule B, called the Schedule of Contributors. This form holds the names and addresses of donors along with the amount they donated. This information is not public, and generally nonprofits do not disclose it. But California Attorney General Kamala Harris wanted the names of AFP Foundation's donors, and she demanded its Schedule B. An AFP Foundation said no, and now a federal judge has ruled that, in his words, the Attorney General's Schedule B disclosure requirement is unconstitutional as applied to AFP. Well, in response to that ruling, AFP Foundation board member Mark Holden said, Federal District Court Judge Manuel Real issued a permanent injunction to enjoin the Attorney General of California from demanding AFP Foundation's donors list. After a full bench trial, the court found the Attorney General's disclosure requirement was an unconstitutional violation of the First Amendment as applied to AFP Foundation. The court also found that the Attorney General's demand chills the exercise of AFP Foundation donors' First Amendment freedoms to speak anonymously and to engage in expressive association. And when I asked, Holden added, "From my perspective as an AFP board member and a citizen, is that it is a great day for First Amendment free speech and free association." Now, why might donors choose to be anonymous, and why is protecting that right important? Well, in his decision, the judge wrote, "During the course of trial, the court heard ample evidence establishing that AFP, its employers, supporters, and donors face public threats, harassment, intimidation, and retaliation once their support for and affiliation with the organization becomes publicly known." Now, disclosure has been used as a political weapon. In its reporting on this issue, the Wall Street Journal noted that the judge, in this case, is an LBJ appointee who can recall when disclosure was used as a political weapon in the Jim Crow South. Well, Judge Reel was born in 1924 and appointed to the court in 1966 by President Johnson. And in his opinion, Judge Reel wrote, "Although the Attorney General correctly points out that such abuses are not as violent or pervasive as those encountered in NAACP versus Alabama or other cases from that era, this court is not prepared to wait until an AFP opponent carries out one of the numerous death threats made against its members." Well, today, those who advocate for free markets, limited government, and economic freedom are often verbally assaulted and threatened, and sometimes those threats become physical and real. But it is not only those who this ruling benefits. Today, there are people who may want to donate to controversial matters such as supporting gay rights, but may still be in the closet, so to speak. Conservatives who support issues like abolition of the death penalty, criminal justice reform, and legalization of drugs are often branded by their fellows as closet liberals who are soft on crime. Should all of these people be denied the right to speech? Well, now we know the Constitution says no, and that's good news. Welcome back to Wichita Liberty TV. I'm Bob Weeks. In the first segment of today's show, I talked about charter schools, how they are most beneficial for the most disadvantaged students, and how the Kansas education establishment fights against charter schools. Here's a video that talks about charter schools in Philadelphia. And although specific to that city, what is explained in this video is common to charter schools across the country. Well, except Kansas, that is. After the video, ask yourself, why can't we have these in Kansas?
Hi, I'm David Hardy for PhillySchoolChoice.com. I've been working in charter schools since the very first one opened in Philadelphia 17 years ago. I find that many people who oppose the charter movement have made up several myths which they peddle as facts. Let's look at some of them.
Do charter schools cost the district money? The answer is the district costs the district money. And the district costs the district money because for the last 15 or 16 years, every time a charter school opened and was authorized for 1,000 students, the district didn't downsize itself.
When I left the district, there were 225,000 children that were being served. And that was in 2000, when did I leave? 2. At last count, they were serving 127,000 children. What happened to 100,000 children over a 10-year period? Their families moved out of the city. They went to Catholic schools or independent schools or charter schools.
We do a lot more with a lot less. And frankly, our annual reporting reflects that. I think it comes down to layers of bureaucracy. We are so agile and so lean.
Public charter schools receive $8,000 per student to educate that student for a year. Philadelphia public schools, the same student, $12,000 per student, and they don't pass that $4,000 on to us. So we get $8,000 and they get $12,000, plus they take $4,000 from us.
When parents choose to send their child to a charter school, all of that money should go with that child rather than 25 cents on a dollar staying back into a district to shore up a district that really can't deal with its own infrastructure because it hasn't managed its downsizing properly.
The district just writes us a check for the money that's ours. Be clear on that. That's the money that the state has said belongs to that charter school.
I spent 43 years in public education, and I was at a school where you could pick the students. So nobody knows that experience more than I do, having been in a magnet school in the city of Philadelphia. And the students were chosen for both academic ability as well as musical skills. So having come here and working with Angela Corsiniti at the String Theory High School the last year and a half or so, that is absolutely a myth, because here we have a cross-section of children. I've witnessed the lottery. The school district was witness to the lottery. It's done up above board. We did it in the lobby of our school where anyone could come and see exactly whom we picked, and it was done just by chance.
We have, I think, 15% of our students have an IEP, and our families of our special needs students absolutely love our school and celebrate it, and have felt disenfranchised by the city schools.
There's a myth that charter schools have no oversight. And, you know, it is very sad, because if we had any more oversight, I would be filtering reports and not educating children in classrooms here. I've had to hire 5 additional staff and pay them to do nothing but reports for the state, the school district of Philadelphia, and the federal government.
The law gives us a certain amount of autonomy. However, the amount of oversight by the school district of Philadelphia increases every year. I mean, I'd love to show you our charter renewal application. It was literally 6 inches wide. I have it downstairs if you'd like to see it. So there is a tremendous amount of oversight.
They don't pass the state test, so we can be shut down. But there are schools within blocks of my school that never make the state goal, and those schools are never under threat of being shut down.
No, we are a nonprofit 501c3. We do not make any money, and we have to provide everything that we provide for our students on 75 cents on a dollar.
I think that, at least in the city of Philadelphia, the public school mentality has always been that if you are successful, that you're elitist. There are actually underachieving children who come from poor economic backgrounds who do quite well and achieve.
85% of my parents get free and reduced lunch service. So they're not rich parents who can send their children to private schools or who could afford to pay for private schools, but they are parents who want what's right for their children. At our school, we have over 1,000 people waiting to get into our school. My school is filled. I cannot take anyone else.
We have a 0 dropout rate as compared to the public schools' 40% dropout rate. And we have 97% of our students attend college, and 2 to 3% go to trade school. 97 and 98 go to college. 100% graduation in 13 years. Not one child has dropped out.
For 10 straight years, 100% of our 12th graders have been admitted to at least one 4-year college or university.
I think competition is the best thing that could happen to education, period. The fact that people can choose whatever venue they would like to have, whether it be Catholic, private, public charter, public schools, whatever the case may be. Nothing could be better than the fact that you have a choice to make.
The people in this city are saying, we want charter schools. But then you have the few people, the public or the few, the union, the whatever, saying no. We don't want charter schools. Why? Let me tell you how many people who were in the union, their children go to charter schools. See, I think we need to do a survey like that.
Just heard 5 myths about charter schools. Now it's time for the truth. Parents choose charter schools because they believe it's the best option for their children. Every day in Philadelphia, charter schools are educating children and saving lives by the thousands, and we need more of them. I'm David Hardy for PhillySchoolChoice.com.